welcome to our spiffy new format for Monday Lab on the Discord channel. We are here somewhat informally to discuss this terrible thing called intuitive continuity. But really, we've been discussing this for 2 solid years. I gave a presentation in Italy about it then, and it's been through, the presentation is available. It's cropped up in all these different conversations. The topic has, appeared in all these different conversations. So, Gregory, I think that's you, right?
Yes, hello.
Hi, can you give us your camera?
No, I don't have a cam in this
Oh,
computer.
in
I'm
that
sorry.
case, you'll be very lucky. I'll pick some suitable cartoon and paste it over your face.
Yeah, nice. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mhm. So we have this topic, and everybody I think, has engaged with a little bit. So I want to get practical in this lab. I don't want to present or lecture. I maybe say available to clarify. If somebody says, well, wait a minute, what are you even talking about? I mean, I can help, but let's just jump straight in. Manu is actually the leader of the day, to just talk about playing a thing, and then we're going to look at the way that a plot came out of it. Sound okay? You're
Nice.
up.
Okay, so what motivated I rejoice in your willingness to discuss this, even though I know you've done a lot of work on it already. And what motivated it was it. I still think that when I run games and when I try to write games, I don't. I usually don't know what I'm doing most of the time, and I mean, I sort of understand the abstract distinction between intuitive continuity and the alternative, but when it comes down to doing it in the moment, I'm not always able to make a connection. So if I can understand what I'm doing and what's going on, then maybe I would, if I write games, I could write it down. So it would be good.
What's the game session we're going to talk about?
So the game session, I think, will be the first example I have is the one that I did with my niece. And so in that session, I felt that, well, first of all, it was going to be my niece's first role-playing experience. I wanted to have her a good experience. So I felt a certain amount of pressure. And it was an impromptu game. So there was no like established rule set or anything like that. Like she just asked me about D&D and what it was like. And so we just sat down to play something impromptu. And so what I started with was, well, I was a little bit worried because in the lecture that you gave in Italy, like when you described one of the main differences between intuitive continuity and the alternative, is there a standard word for the alternative, by the way?
I think that we are not talking about equivalent categories. Alternative continuity is a technique.
Okay.
So it's not like a type of play in some huge grand scheme with a name that then you look at some other type. It's just the technique of the situation is so under their control. It's basically like writing the dungeon one step ahead of where they're going. And the simplest idea would be, well, about now is a great time for them to run into a dragon. So they say they turn left. Well, guess what? A dragon's there.
I see.
And that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. It's usually done somewhat more subtly in terms of backstory content. So you just start playing and you're playing Cyberpunk, and somebody's somebody decides that their character is all about kids and their safety. Fantastic. Somebody's kidnapping kids. Right. So you're basically just playing one step ahead of anything that's expressed, so that it looks as though they are discovering more and more and more.
But they're not. But their decisions aren't actually doing it.
Right. Correct. Their decisions are
Okay.
going to be getting somewhere because you're always providing a somewhere. Again, I don't
Right.
want to lecture too much, but the biggest problem that we've had in discussing this, as you know, is that it's too easy to say, oh, it's improvisation. And that's not really the issue. The improvisation as such is not really the key defining thing. You could have a game with a lot of improvisation, but without that character, without that exact phenomenon.
Okay.
And you can have a game where a lot of things are fixed, just not really important ones that you do use the technique with. So even though the most visible aspect of intuitive continuity, as you say, is this improvisational, twisting character, but that's not the defining quality. It's just the most visible aspect of the way that you're staying in control of what's happening. You're staying in control of the pacing of everything. You're staying in control of the superstructure, of what you're doing. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. So the real issue then is the amount of agency the participants have.
Right. In many ways, it's kind of a speed chess version of illusionism.
Okay.
Right.
Got it. All right. Okay, so in this game, so like I said, there was no pre-established background or anything. So I basically just kind of co-created there. So I figured, okay, let's it's going to be a fantasy setting because they want to D&D. I asked them questions so that we kind of co-created their home village. And, I said, okay, who in the village doesn't like you? Who in the village do you like?
Do you guys remember this? Does anyone else remember this besides me? Because Manu, you're being really boring. This was cute as hell. What did they did really cool things. So what were they?
So, well, what my thinking was, okay, so we established this kind of home village, right? And they had, I knew that they liked the Mandalorian a lot. Are you familiar with that?
Keep going. Yeah, we're all geeks here.
So there was the baby Yoda and those kind of things. They really like cute things. So I asked them who was like the kind of cute creature in the village, and so they came up with one. And so then I decided, okay, there needs to be a problem to solve, and so I took one of the NPCs that they had created, who had it in for them, and I decided, okay, that NPC would create a kind of would kind of lure that cute creature into the zombie infested graveyard, and then then the PCs would hear that the creature was in danger and then go to save them. So that was my thinking.
Okay, so let's stop here for a sec. Yeah. Does anybody see any difference between this and preparing for any other role-playing session? Because I don't.
Other than when he decided to make that decision?
That you're right, that's a detail that they did more or less with a bit of, interaction, right? But you could have done the character creation 2 weeks ahead of time, and Manu could have come up with these things a week ahead of time. And what's the difference, right? I mean, that's just a matter of exactly when. But so far, we're not really talking about how things happens during play and then what you decided was, going to happen.
Right.
So
But on the subject of prep, that was one thing that had confused me a little bit because during I think in your Italy lecture you talked about how it was like prep was kind of essential.
well, if I'm
Not
talking
just,
about
okay,
avoiding intuitive continuity,
right.
if I'm talking about doing that, then
Mm-hmm.
when something is solid in play, everybody is kind of honor bound to say this is solid. If you bounce off it, if you do this thing, there's going to be some kind of necessary interaction, or this thing has an identity. Now, the easiest way for you to have that solidity is to prepare it beforehand and write it down and have it inked, and that's why people like published material, because they feel like the dungeon really fucking exists, right? It's right there. They published it. I bought it. It's sitting there on my desk, right? But the fact is that that's as, it's as fluid. If you choose to treat it fluidly, then it's as fluid as anything else, published or not. Similarly, if you did spitball it into existence, right? Like the day before play or halfway through play, if you did spitball it into existence, but whatever is the outcome because of it, you're going to live with. You're going to say that outcome is, it's going to go according to what we know. I can't just take any outcome and make it go any which way I want with this thing. So, in other words, the thing, once it's in there, like the zombie infested pit or the enemy or any detail of the town at all, if it's in there in play and you say, I'm going to honor that thing's impact or response in play, that it's not just a way for them to just bounce to the next thing that I'm either going to make up later or I have planned, no matter what happens. I mean, the characters are caught in the French catacombs. They're searching through the French catacombs. They're looking for the bones of the vampire with the stake through its heart that they're going to try to resurrect or something. I don't know, or maybe whatever. They're a bunch of vampires and they're down there in the tombs of, in the catacombs below Paris. I mean, what else do I have to tell you? And they run into the hyena ghouls. And if I know that either they're going to kill all the hyena ghouls and they're going to find the mysterious coin that one of them is carrying, that I just, I could have prepped it or not, but they're going to find it. Or the hyena ghouls will rip them up, with a few bad rolls, the characters will get ripped up, but the hyena ghouls will run off and one of them will drop the coin. So the whole thing, I mean, they're going to get the coin.
So that's intuitive continuity.
Right. But the thing about intuitive continuity is that in its sort of most pure or most extreme sense, is that I'm just figuring out, I don't even make up the coin beforehand because you know what? It doesn't even matter what it is. This time I just figure, hey, it's a coin. We haven't seen a coin yet. Coin will be cool. So
the problem is
that's what I'm saying, is that if you add that improvisation, then it becomes very, very clear what you're doing. So if you prepped that coin way ahead of time, then you can say, well, that's railroading. What I'm saying is that you might fool yourself and say, well, because I improvised it, I'm not railroading, when you are.
Because they had no choice but to
discover
it, no matter what their choice.
Doesn't matter when you made it up. They're going to get it. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
So this is intuitive continuity, or?
Yes, this is the topic, or the name comes actually from a game in the early 1990s. And that particular author, Gareth Michael Skarka, referred to it and used it as his directive technique in his games for years. And it was a pretty good articulation of a very common way to GM a game, which was that it was a way for you to keep control of the story and where it goes, but the players were very, very busy. Whatever they investigated would turn up what was going on, to the degree that you wanted to let them know something. And whatever they either did or didn't have an effect based on whether you felt like making it important at the moment. And it's a really good way to control the arc of, like, say, a convention session. The players are very busy. They're investigating, they're looking, they're talking to each other, they're having opinions, they're, bullying people. They're doing what all player characters do. And then you make it important just ahead of them all the way through.
Whatever they do,
pretty much, yeah.
It seems it led them to getting what the story is about, or like
right, and especially
getting them to the goal.